You got the thing. And then the wanting came back. Maybe it was the house. Finally the right house, the one you'd been picturing for years. Maybe it was the career milestone. The number in the account. The relationship, the retirement. Maybe it was smaller than that. The thing in the cart, the meal you'd been thinking about all week, the evening you'd been looking forward to since Monday. You got it. And for a moment, maybe a long moment, it was enough. And then the wanting came back, not dramatically, not like grief, more like a tide. The satisfaction receded, and underneath it, the same low hum you've always carried was still there, unchanged, as if nothing had happened. As if the thing you spent months wanting had passed through you without landing. Most people spend a lifetime explaining this to themselves. They tell themselves they chose the wrong things, that they need to want better things, more meaningful things, the right things. They restructure, they upgrade, they simplify, they spiritualize, they try the next thing. And the hum remains. Blaise Pascal had a name for what you're feeling, not the name you've probably heard. The popular one, the bumper sticker version that gets attributed to him at the end of sermons and printed on coffee mugs. That version has been repeated so many times that almost no one has gone back to check whether he actually said it. He didn't, and what he actually wrote is stranger and more honest and far harder to dismiss. By the end of this video, I'm going to read you Pascal's real words, not the famous phrase, but the actual text from the actual work in full. And I want to warn you in advance, it does something the popular version doesn't. It doesn't let you off the hook by giving you a simple answer. It names the problem so precisely that you'll feel it land in a place where the comfortable version never reached. But first, we need to demolish the version you already know. Because the version you already know is exactly weak enough to ignore. The phrase God-shaped hole gets attributed to Blaise Pascal constantly. In sermons, in Christian publishing, in apologetics conversations, in YouTube comments, in tattoos. The idea behind it is real enough. There is a vacancy in human beings that cannot be satisfied by earthly things, and only God can fill it. That is genuinely Pascal's territory. The problem is the phrase itself. Pascal never wrote God-shaped hole. The compression likely traces to the 20th century. Most scholarship points toward the evangelist Ravi Zacharias, who popularized the phrase as a paraphrase of Pascal. That's not a condemnation of Zacharias. Paraphrases serve a purpose. The problem is when the paraphrase replaces the original, and what gets lost in the compression is precisely the thing that made the original worth reading. God-shaped hole is a comforting image. It implies a specific shape, a specific fit, a lock waiting for the right key. The solution is implied in the problem. You have a hole shaped like God, so the answer is to put God in it, which sounds right and feels right, and still somehow doesn't fully account for the experience of people who have, by every external measure, put God in the hole, who have gone to church for 40 years, who have prayed and read and believed, and who still lie awake at 3 in the morning carrying the same low hum. The God-shaped hole framing doesn't help those people much. Because if the hole is God-shaped and you have God, the hole should be closed. And if it isn't closed, the logical implication is that there's something wrong with you, that you're not doing it right, not believing hard enough, not filling the hole correctly. Pascal's actual text does not say that. Pascal's actual text says something more structurally honest, and it doesn't locate the failure in you. But I want to earn that text. I want to give you the architecture before I give you the words. Because if I just read you the quote cold, it will sound like a quote. If I walk you to it correctly, it will sound like the thing you've been trying to say for 30 years. In the Pensées, his collected notes and fragments, published after his death, Pascal keeps returning to a single diagnostic question. Why does the human being perpetually flee from himself? Not why is humanity sinful, in the abstract theological sense. Something more specific and more observable. Why do human beings, when given any length of unstructured time alone, become uncomfortable almost immediately? Why does silence feel like pressure? Why does an empty afternoon become a problem to be solved, rather than a gift to be inhabited? Pascal called the mechanism divertissement. The French word is usually translated as diversion or distraction, but neither English word carries the full weight of what he meant. Divertissement isn't leisure. It isn't rest. It is, in Pascal's reading, a structural defense against something the self is afraid to face when the noise stops. In Pensées fragment 136, Pascal describes a thought experiment. Imagine a king with every comfort available to him, sitting alone in a quiet room with no distractions. According to Pascal, the king becomes miserable almost immediately. Not because of any particular problem or grief, simply because the silence creates the conditions in which he would be forced to feel what he normally drowns out. Pascal's extension of this, and this is the narrator's reading of his logic, not a direct quote, is that modern accumulation works exactly the same way. Every new purchase, every upgrade, every scroll, every notification, every event on the calendar serves the same function the king's hunting trip or his gambling hall served in the 17th century. It puts noise in the room. It keeps the silence at bay. It prevents the moment of stillness in which the hum would become audible. This is not a moral accusation. Pascal is not saying you are weak or shallow or materialistic in some contemptible way. He is saying the mechanism is nearly universal, nearly structural, nearly inevitable. Because what the silence reveals, if you let it, is genuinely terrifying. Not in a dramatic way, in the quiet way of a question you cannot answer. The question the silence asks is, what is this for? And underneath that, is what I have built going to be enough? And underneath that, the one that's hardest to sit with, is this all there is? Pascal's diagnosis is that divertissement, distraction, accumulation, the constant forward motion of modern consumer life is not greed, it is a theology. It is the working assumption that if you can just keep the noise loud enough, and the calendar full enough, and the cart full enough, you will never have to hear the question the silence is asking. The tragedy Pascal identifies is not that the strategy is immoral, it's that the strategy cannot work. Not because you're doing it wrong, because of what the silence is actually pointing at. Here is something about Pascal that doesn't get mentioned in the popular versions of his ideas. He lived the life he was diagnosing. By his early 20s, Blaise Pascal was among the most celebrated intellects in France. He had invented one of the earliest mechanical calculators at 19, a working machine, not a theory. He had done foundational work in fluid dynamics, geometry, and probability theory. He moved in the most sophisticated intellectual and social circles available to him. He had the mind, the reputation, the world, and on the night of November 23, 1654, something happened. We know this because of a document called the Memorial, a piece of parchment Pascal wrote that same night, in a state he described as one of fire, and which he had sewn into the lining of his coat. He kept it there, hidden against his body, for the rest of his life. When he died, at 39, his servants found it while preparing his body. The text begins, "Fire, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, not of the philosophers and scholars. Certainty, certainty, heartfelt, joy, peace." He gave away his wealth. He moved into simplicity. He stopped pursuing the intellectual celebrity he'd spent his early life accumulating. He spent the remaining 8 years of his life. They were not easy years. He was in chronic pain for most of them, writing the fragments that became the Pensées. I bring this up not as a conversion testimonial. Pascal is not a data point in an argument. I bring it up because the man who wrote the most precise diagnosis of human accumulation in Western literature had already tried accumulation. He had the calculator and the salon and the reputation. He wrote from the inside of the experience, not from above it. He knew what the hum felt like. He knew what the noise was covering. Before I give you Pascal's actual text, I want to tell you something about the mini-course that accompanies this channel. It's called The Wrecked Interior, Pascal's Guide to Spiritual Dryness. 5 lessons, pre-recorded. Each one walking through a stage of Pascal's diagnosis of what happens when the hunger turns inward, when it's not consumerism that's going hollow, but the faith itself, the going through the motions experience, the Sunday morning that produces nothing, the prayers that feel like talking into a ceiling. If this video is landing somewhere real for you, that course is where Pascal takes it further than 20 minutes of narration can. It's in the link in the description or the pinned comment. That's all I'll say about it. Here is what Pascal actually wrote. This is from Pensées, fragment 148. I'm reading the A.J. Crailsheimer translation, Penguin Classics, verbatim. What else does this craving and this helplessness proclaim but that there was once in man a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace. This he tries in vain to fill from all his surroundings, seeking in things that are not there the help he cannot find in those that are. Though none can help, since this infinite abyss can only be filled by an infinite and immutable object. In other words, by God himself. Sit with that for a moment. Not God-shaped hole. Infinite abyss. And notice what that word infinite actually does to the argument. Because this is where Pascal's version departs completely from the comfortable compression and becomes something neither easily dismissed nor easily resolved. A hole has a shape. A shape implies a fit. If the problem is a God-shaped hole, the solution is conceptually simple. You find the thing that fits and you put it in. If the solution isn't working, the logical conclusion is operator error. You're not filling it right. An infinite abyss is categorically different. Infinity is not a large hole. Infinity is a different kind of thing than any finite object. And this is the move Pascal is making. Not a poetic move, a geometric one. An infinite cavity cannot be filled by a finite object. Not because the finite object is the wrong shape, because the category is wrong. You could stack every finite thing that has ever existed, every house, every career, every relationship, every achievement, every pleasure, every experience, and you would not have made a single unit of progress toward filling an infinite space. The math doesn't work. It cannot work, which means, and follow this carefully because this is where the inversion lives, the fact that finite things don't satisfy you is not a diagnosis of your character. It is a description of the arithmetic. You are not failing to be satisfied because you are greedy or shallow or spiritually deficient, or because you haven't found the right finite things yet. You are failing to be satisfied because you are built with a capacity that the finite world cannot, by definition, address. The wanting that keeps returning after every acquisition is not evidence of your disorder. It is evidence of your architecture. And here is the move that doesn't make it into the bumper sticker version at all. Pascal says the craving proclaims something. He asks what it announces. His answer is that it announces the memory, faint, distorted, preserved only as empty print and trace, of a happiness that was real. The craving is not a malfunction. It is a signal. It is the sound of a receiver that was built for a frequency the surrounding noise cannot produce. That's a different problem than you need to want different things. It is the problem of being built for something that the visible world does not contain. And it does not resolve neatly. Pascal doesn't offer the neat resolution, and I won't offer it on his behalf. What he offers instead is something harder and more honest. A name for the experience and a direction the name points. The direction is not inward. It is not try harder. It is not want less. The direction is outward and upward, toward the only category of object that could theoretically correspond to an infinite need. Pascal names it an infinite and immutable object, in other words, by God himself. He does not say, and I will not say on his behalf, that arriving at that object is simple, or that the craving simply stops once you turn toward it, or that the long years of hollow practice and the 3 a.m. silence and the low hum will immediately resolve. Pascal's own life was not that tidy. He lived in chronic pain. He carried questions that stayed open. The memorial was not the end of his wrestling. It was the beginning of a different kind of it, but he gave the hunger its right name. And the name changes what you do with it. Here is what I think Pascal would say, and I want to be clear that what follows is an extension of his logic, not a quotation of his words. To the person who has been accumulating and acquiring and upgrading and filling the calendar, and who still hears the hum, he would not say, "You've been choosing the wrong things. Stop wanting the house and want God instead." He would say something more structurally precise. The category of thing you've been reaching for cannot satisfy an infinite need, not because you've been reaching for bad things, but because all of them, every one of them, belongs to the same finite category, and finite things cannot fill an infinite space. The mechanism isn't greed. The mechanism is a mismatch between what you are and what the market sells. The market is very good at selling finite things. It has no product for an infinite need, and so it sells you the next finite thing, and the next, each one quietly promising to be the one that finally closes the gap, and each one quietly failing because the gap is not a gap. It is an abyss. And the abyss is infinite. And then, this is the move Pascal makes that almost nobody repeats. He says, look at what the craving proves. If you have an infinite need, you were built with infinite capacity. You were made for something the market cannot name. The craving isn't the disease. The craving is the evidence that something larger than the market's inventory was involved in making you. That doesn't resolve the ache, but it relocates it. It moves the hunger from the category of flaw to the category of signal. And a signal, unlike a flaw, has a direction. Pascal wrote somewhere else in the Pensées a line that I want to leave you with. It is from fragment 114 in Lafuma's numbering. It reads, "Man's greatness comes from knowing he is wretched, not from fixing the wretchedness, not from transcending it, from knowing it precisely, honestly, without the comfortable compression that makes it easier to bear but harder to navigate. The infinite abyss is not the evidence that something is broken in you. It is the evidence of what you are built for. The hum isn't the problem. The hum is the compass. If you've ever stood in the store, or at a milestone, or at the end of a year you'd been waiting for, and felt the wanting come back before you'd even finished arriving, I'd like to hear when you first noticed it, not comment below. Tell me when it started.